Joining us right now, not to talk about kidnapping people at gunpoint, but to talk about what's happening down in Austin with the state legislative session. Chuck DeVore, the Vice President of Policy over at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Chuck, good morning. How are you?
Hey, good morning. Doing great.
You're doing better than the family who kidnapped their kid.
Well, things happen sometimes.
How's everything going down in Austin?
Well, I think things are going pretty well. The session's beginning to crank up. We have committee assignments in the House. We've got kind of the outlines of the spending plans taking shape in the House and the Senate, and we're doing what we can to encourage the legislature to spend a modest amount of money so that we can make sure that we have enough room for tax cuts and that we don't keep growing government faster than Texans can pay for it.
Yeah, yesterday, a big press conference held by the Texas Public Policy Foundation about the conservative budget. Y'all presented that yesterday, correct?
Well, we did, and it wasn't just us. We had some coalition partners there. We had a representative from the National Federation of Independent Business. We had someone there from Americans for Prosperity. We had Texans for Fiscal Responsibility and the R Street Institute. And there were others who couldn't make it, but were part of the coalition, but they have day jobs, and sometimes it's tough to go on down to the Capitol when you're trying to earn a living and pay your taxes. And the point of the press conference was to encourage the Texas Legislature to cap the rate of growth for the current budget that they're now negotiating to no more than 6.5%, 6.5% growth over last year's budget, to a total of $217.1 billion. And what the 6.5% is based on is the amount of population growth and inflation in the state of Texas for the last 2 years. So we have a 2-year budget, and what we're saying is government should be able to live with basically having a COLA increase. And then you, of course, add a little bit of extra money for the people that have moved into the state or new Texans that have been born, and that ought to be enough.
Yeah, and this is something that I know that this is not the first year that y'all have presented this type of conservative budget plan, or that the coalition has. This is something that y'all have been advocating for a long time now.
Well, it is, but what's different this year is, based on the lessons of last session, we have been on this early, very early, even before the election.
Right.
We were out saying, okay, here's what a conservative budget would look like. We'll just assume that all the past spending is okay and that we're at the right amount of spending. So let's not try to go back and argue the past. Let's just, going forward, let's say that we ought to restrain the overall rate of growth, not the official spending cap, because that only covers about 40% of state spending. What we're talking about is all funds being spent, including federal funds. Let's restrict them to the sum of population and inflation for the last 2 years. And we've been saying that early enough that we've been trying to make sure that the lawmakers receive the message and that they have plenty of time to implement it, and that they can't tell us later on, well, gee, if you'd only told us sooner, we could have done it, but you told us too late in the process. So
Sure.
We didn't want them to be able to claim that we didn't tell them early enough. So we've been working on it for many months now.
Well, what is the reception, I guess, by some of the lawmakers out there?
Well, I think the reception is so far so good. I mean, we have cautious optimism because if you look, for example, at the budget blueprints, first really more of an intent statement sent out by the House, but then the actual budget, since this is the year for the Senate to produce the budget under Finance Chair Senator Nelson, it appears that the intent is to spend under the cap, at least so far. Now, these things tend to grow as the session goes on. So if you look at our recommended cap of $217 billion, they seem to be, closer to the $203, $205 billion. Of course, that's not with Medicaid fully funded, and then there's still some discussion about how the tax cuts are going to be accounted for, whether it ends up being accounted for as spending or not. But it looks like the intent of the leadership is to try to stay under that cap, which would just be fantastic if we could restrain the rate of growth in Texas and have kind of Texas point out to the rest of the country that it can be done, and,
right.
and that you'll have more economic prosperity, more jobs created, more freedom, and less government. Everybody wins.
Well, that's what I was about to ask you is big picture, how does this affect the average Texan out there? You know, someone who's tuning in right now hearing this going, okay, that all sounds good, but how does that really impact me?
Well, depending on how you calculate it, if you look at spending over the last decade, right, if we had restrained the rate of spending growth in Texas to population plus inflation for a decade, right, the average Texas family of four would be seeing taxes, as I recall it, about $1,800 a year less. And that's how it affects the average Texan. You know, it adds up in time to be a large number. Any given budget year, it's just a few $100, but you do a few $100 every year, and before you know it, you're talking about $1,800 more in taxes after a decade.
Right.
So, yeah, it adds up. And here's the other thing. It isn't just the taxes. When you have bigger government, what else do you have more of? You have more bureaucrats and regulators telling you how to run your life. And you have smaller government, you have less of that. So it isn't just on the tax side, it's also on the regulatory side and just the overall size of government and the amount of government employees you end up hiring with all that tax money.
Visiting with Chuck DeVore, Texas Public Policy Foundation. You can visit their website at texaspolicy.com and get all this information as well and go through. It's a great source of information there at texaspolicy.com. Chuck, let me also ask you, last week when we were wrapping up our call, I know we talked slightly about a big press conference that was going on, a big rally down in Austin about school choice, and that is something that is going to be, I think, a major part of this legislative session, this debate over school choice or not. Texas Public Policy Foundation, you guys embrace school choice. For those of us out here in West Texas, it's a debate that I don't think is heard a lot, just because it's easy for folks out here in West Texas to move their kid around to a different school. Tell us a little bit about school choice and why it's a good thing for the state, in your opinion.
Well, there's a lot of reasons why it would be good for the state, but to go to your point about the rally, there were about 1,000 children and teachers and parents who were at the Capitol last week for School Choice Week. There was the Republican voters have certainly been polled on their support of school choice, and about 83% of Republican voters supported. About 80% of Hispanics in Texas supported. There's about 100,000 kids on waiting lists for charter schools. And then you look at what would school choice do for student achievement for all Texans. Well, in Washington, D.C., a place where there's been tremendous challenges with the public school system, they had some limited school choice there for the last few years, and grant recipients, students who had the opportunity to go to a school of their choice, graduated at a rate of 91%, which is 20 percentage points higher than the same folks, the applicants who were not accepted into the program. So the same pool of people, the children that had a chance to improve their education had a 20% higher graduation rate, and that translates into more employment opportunities and a better economy. In North Carolina, you see that criminal activity among high-risk students declined by 50% when the parents were provided school choice. In New York, African-American enrollment in selective colleges doubled among students who had a grant through their school choice program. So what ends up happening with school choice is that you get a stronger economy, you get lower crime, and for folks out in the Lubbock area, the last thing you want is children in your major metropolitan centers in Texas not having an opportunity to live the American dream, because if they don't, they're going to be facing, in many cases, a life of government dependency. And if you're going to be dependent on government, that's going to absorb tax dollars. It's not going to be healthy for the Texas economy. And frankly, your fellow Texans are just not going to have the opportunities that people out in Lubbock are used to. So the other thing as well is even in rural areas, school choice is beneficial because what you'll see are greater opportunities for things like blended learning. In other words, you go to your classroom, but if there's perhaps an advanced math class or chemistry, you might be able to take that class through some video teleconferencing service that isn't now available, because you don't necessarily have the wide range of courses that you can take in many of the rural schools in Texas. And we think that school choice would increase the availability of some of these very important college preparatory classes.
Visiting with Chuck DeVore, talking a little school choice here. You look at the past legislative session, school choice really hasn't gotten anywhere. We have a more conservative Senate this time, which I think will probably be more open to school choice. I think previous versions of the Senate have not been open to it. Do you see that playing out in that way, that maybe because this Senate is more conservative that we could probably see school choice make its way through?
I think you're right on that. I think you're hitting on something there, that there's a great opportunity because of the nature of the Senate. And, of course, we have a bicameral system, right? So if something comes out of the Senate, if it gets parked over in the House for a while, there's plenty of opportunity for the lieutenant governor to try to work the bill and try to arrange for its passage out of the House. So we're optimistic that this is the best chance that Texas has seen in its history to pass meaningful school choice reform.
Well, and it's an interesting issue, and it's one that has not always necessarily divided Republicans and Democrats, because I remember last year you had Senator Ted Cruz and Sheila Jackson Lee of Houston, together on school choice, which is, those two together on any issue, probably very few issues they would be in agreement with, but together they came together and rallied for school choice, which is interesting to see.
Yeah, I mean, heck, even in California, when in my last year in the legislature in California, I voted for a bill that passed by one vote that gave public school choice for failing schools in California, of all places.
Yeah.
Actually passed into law, and the coalition was the Republicans voting with more moderate Democrats in California. So if California could pass at least a version of school choice that seems to be more advanced than what Texas has, shame on Texas.
Yeah, I think so. Hey, Chuck, I appreciate your time today, and we'll visit with you again next week. Reminder to everybody, go to TexasPolicy.com. You can check out it's a great website, ton of information that you can use all year long, and especially right now during the legislative session. Chuck, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
You too.
Chuck DeVore, Texas Public Policy Foundation.